It seems like it's been 40 weeks since you got 40 winks. Your back pain? Unbearable. Tossing, turning, trying to find that pain-free position. And that's the moment you realize you can't spend another waking moment putting off treatment.
The Joint and Spine Center is Cincinnati's leading destination for spine care, with a ton of surgical and non-surgical treatments for back pain. So when a moment has the power to change the rest of your life, go to the one place with the power to change it for the better, the Christ Hospital Health Network. This changes everything.
The Pound This podcast is brought to you by Sway, artfully crafted, ready-to-drink cocktails from Mad Tree Brewing. This is episode 773, a raw conversation about self-worth, connection, and authenticity with Weslea O'Connor.
I want to lose weight, but I don't know how to get started.
What should I meal prep every week?
How do I get those sweet booty gains?
Inspiration for your healthy lifestyle. The Pound This podcast with Amanda Valentine.
Thank you so much for listening to the Pound This podcast. Before I get into this awesome conversation with Weslea, I want to talk to you about my friend Sarah and Team Fit With Me. If you're looking for a fantastic health coach that can help you, whether you have autoimmune disorders or you have PCOS, or you've just always tried to lose weight and you can't, or you're not even trying to lose weight, you're trying to gain strength, or you just want to know more about macros and what you're eating or exercise, Sarah and her entire team are awesome, including having a mindset coach on staff. And I've been using Sarah as my health coach for the past, year and a half now. So if you want to work with Sarah and you want to save 10% on month one of all packages and plans, go to teamfitwithme.com/poundthis. And Sarah will be flying in from Phoenix for my Pound This party at Mad Tree Brewing in Cincinnati, Saturday, August 6th. So me and Sarah are going to be talking about nutrition and macros in person. If you want to come to the Pound This party, which is going to be an awesome time. It's going to be an entire day of wellness, live podcast where we're going to talk to Rochelle Ferboda about sexual health. Lindsay Bonadano is going to be talking about mental health. Plus, we're going to have lots of snacks and lunch, and we're going to drink sways, and I might get a little bit too turnt because it's also going to be my 40th birthday. And you find tickets for the Pound This party on in the show notes. Also, you can go to poundthis.com and there's a little thing up there too, or just search Eventbrite. And I just found out last night at the time of recording this that Deanna is going to be coming from Canada to my Pound This party. So I'm excited that people are making the freaking trip from Canada to come to Cincinnati of all places for my Pound This party. So I would love if you want to come. And Weslea, this is, where I'm going to pressure you now. I know that you're in Austin, so you're going to have to come up here in August now and come to my party. So yeah, no excuses.
I was just looking at my calendar, like, what do I have going on August 6th? Can I make that happen?
I know you want to come to the very humid and hot Cincinnati, Ohio in the middle of August. I'm really selling it here.
It's probably better than the middle of August in Austin, Texas, where it is also humid and will definitely be above 100 and just sweltering.
Yeah, that probably sounds a little bit worse. I've been to Austin once, and we saw each other when I was in Austin, and that was 2018, 19, something like that. Right?
That was a long time ago. Time flies.
Yeah, or actually, do you know, was that? Well, no, that was 2017.
Holy cow.
Yeah. And so that's the only time I've ever been there. And I was there for a National Association of Broadcasters conference. And yeah, I wouldn't have guessed. That was my only time really I've been to Texas either. I don't know why I don't put place in my head that Texas is humid. But I also thought Nashville was flat when I flew there for my first half marathon. And I was very incorrect. So
we need some geography lessons.
Yeah. So some backstory about Weslea. One, you've been on this podcast before. I looked it up. You were on this podcast, episode 267 in April of 2019, where we talked about your rheumatoid arthritis and your whole journey for that and being an advocate for yourself. And so I do want to touch on that topic again too. And some backstory too is we worked in radio together in Rochester, New York. And I moved to Rochester in 2006, but we didn't work for the same company yet. I don't think we worked together until maybe 2007.
That sounds right.
I think whenever I went from CBS to Entercom,
Yeah.
and you were on, it's funny because I've spent so much of my career on country stations, and I had never been on a country station then. So I was on 98 PXY, the number one hit music station. and and you were on, did you guys just go by The Bee? Is that what it was called?
Oh gosh, I haven't been in radio so long. I totally forgot the call sign, but I think it's 92.3 WBEE or 92. I don't know. I'm so bad, but yes, I was on the country station. I did middays. I moved to Rochester in 2005, left in 2009. And I haven't done radio since I left Entercom. I think I got burnt out at that point, and I decided to take a different path.
Yeah, yeah. Hey, me too. It just took me a little bit longer and a few more states later before I left that. So I want to, start off by talking about where are you now? What brought you to Austin, and what are you doing now? I mean, obviously you left radio a while ago, but what are you doing now?
I came to Austin via Nashville. I was working in the music industry after I left radio, so I was sort of the liaison between artists and radio. So I didn't quite leave radio at that time. I was still kind of talking to the people behind the scenes and working with music artists on their national tours, introducing them to the public and to radio for the first time. And that was great, but it was a ton of travel. So I met my husband at one of my artists' weddings, and then he was a police officer in Austin at the time. And it was like, well, if we're going to make this work, he's got a pension and I don't. So I guess I'm moving. So he's since retired and is no longer a police officer. And I have been working in real estate for about 8 years now here in Austin. And it's been a wild ride and I love it so much, but it keeps me busier than I ever thought I'd be.
Yeah, well, I bet. Well, just even the housing market in general, it just seems like being a realtor in general now seems totally bonkers. And then I know like Austin is such like a hot city that everybody seems to be moving to. It feels like a Denver or what Portland used to be. It seems like Portland has gotten really sketch and that doesn't seem to be such a hot place to go anymore. But yeah, that just seems very busy and lucrative at the same time.
It's both, but it's also taxing. So it's great. It's busy. I stay super busy. Sometimes my friends forget what I look like, but it's been amazing. And Austin is pretty similar to Nashville, the place where there are also hills.
Yeah.
We have a great music scene just like Nashville. And so I'll have clients that are looking in Nashville and Austin and trying to decide between the two of them. But Austin's just a cool, rapidly growing city that needs to get their infrastructure on point so that as we have more people move here, we can get around without getting LA traffic.
Yeah. Oh, God. I imagine the traffic is terrible. So I want to put a pin in you being a realtor in Austin for a second and come back to that. But I do want to ask you, since we did discuss like your rheumatoid arthritis before, like how is that going? How are you maintaining that? I know we had talked about how you had to do a complete overhaul and how you eat and how you move. Like, I imagine that's still a big part of your life.
Every day after the initial diagnosis, and I overhauled my diet and started eating a lot more clean and cutting out a lot of processed foods. And now I have to live that way. I notice if I slip up or if I have a cheat day, I feel it right away. If I eat too much sugar, my hands tell me almost instantly. So I have just learned to live a little bit of a healthier lifestyle. I have to have movement every day. At the very minimum, I have to go on a walk. But if I skip a couple days of movement or if we're traveling and I don't prioritize getting a workout in, it hurts. So I'm off all medication. I've stayed off all medication for years now, which is huge. And I'm very fortunate that I haven't had to go back on it and hopefully won't have to in the foreseeable future. But diet and exercise and just prioritizing gratitude and prioritizing myself have made a huge difference in that journey.
Well, I just think that's just so huge too to hear that, because I think so many times people wrap health and fitness into weight loss and aesthetics and going into that level, which I mean, that obviously plays its own role. I think all of us want to look good to a degree.
Yeah.
So it's also, for you to just be like, my health depends on this. My pain levels depend on how I eat and how I move. And I think that even for those of us that don't have, any sort of autoimmune disease or rheumatoid arthritis or anything. It's like how much that does play a factor of just, you have like a more extreme level, but it's like what you're putting in your body and how you're moving it does affect pain level and brain fog and it's like all of these other things that are so much more important than how much do I weigh.
100%. And obviously, I mean, even being a person who's mindful of how I eat and mindful of my movement every day, my weight fluctuates. And sometimes I got a few extra pounds of fluff here and there. And as long as I'm prioritizing myself, that is going to ebb and flow. And that's all right. That has to be all right.
Yeah. And so coming back from that to you being a realtor, where we kind of got into a discussion where we're like, I'm like, let's do a podcast about this, was a couple weeks ago. We got on a call because I had some questions for you, and we started talking about just being in like a headspace or just beating yourself up. And you were telling me that you're like in the top like 1% of realtors in Austin, which is like the most freaking amazing thing of like something of like, oh my God, you see this successful career and how your mental space is still like, not to put words in your mouth, but like, like I suck and I'm struggling and I'm not doing good enough. And it's like, oh my God, why are we like this? And like, just like these like realistic struggles of like, yeah, you can see that and stuff on Instagram, but like how you're still like just living in this space in your own head of like, how can you be doing these markers and things that are good for yourself, but still somehow feel like a piece of shit?
It's so weird, isn't it? I mean, I think if you look at either one of us on paper, people would be like, damn, girl. And then we're still waking up, looking in the mirror and having struggles every day. And I think it's really difficult to understand why and where that comes from. But man, if we could see ourselves through other people's eyes or see ourselves through our achievements or realize that every day we're good enough, the world would be such a different place.
Right. Well, and that's what you brought up, like just bringing up gratitude. And so I really try to focus on that myself, or at least especially like having spin out moments, bringing it there, which, it doesn't solve that every time. And it's one of those things, I think, like when you're in the moment, it's so easy to beat yourself up and have all this negative headspace. But it's like, if you zoom out and be like, okay, well, let me actually look at my life and who I am and what I'm doing. Why am I, such a bully to myself for like everything? And I know I've talked so much on this podcast before about bullying yourself over like body image and weight, which there's definitely that, but it's like everything, like how many people, both you and I don't have kids, but I know how many of my friends are parents and bully themselves over, am I a good mom? Or getting like heat from other people, or you're watching other people on Instagram and how they're like portraying their life on Instagram and how perfect their little family is. And it's like, if you peel back the curtain for anybody, all of us are like, ah!
Yes, it's true. And it's so interesting you mentioned the motherhood thing, because I just had lunch with a dear friend a couple of days ago, and she was like, I'm having a rough day because there was this one particular parenting moment with my daughter, and I wish I could redo it. And I'm like, my goodness, it rolls into everything in our lives. I don't know if it's inherently a female thing or if it's everyone's struggling with this, but every female I know replays those things and says, I could have done it better. And I've gotten into this headspace of being like, okay, I did exactly the right thing in exactly the right moment. If I want to go back and revisit it and think I can do it better in the future, that's fine. But I'm not going to sit there at night while I'm trying to fall asleep and replaying the conversation I had with Joe Schmo at the grocery store being like, oh my God, I should have done that differently. Because it doesn't matter in the bigger picture. It's just me obsessing over something that really is irrelevant. It doesn't make me a bad person because I said one wrong thing to a guy at the grocery store.
Right. Or it's not even the wrong thing either. It's like, it's just like that weird anxiety of like, I don't know. I feel like this about myself all the time because I know that I talk a lot and I know that I don't really have a good break system. And it's like, and I'm bad at ending conversations. And so when I feel like other people are doing that, I'm like, oh my God, I must have been so annoying. And they just had to get away from me. And I just like couldn't shut up. And like, it's even like if it was the best conversation, and this has come up a lot too, where I will spend whole afternoons with people and I'm like, oh my, and like in the moment, like that was such a great conversation and what a good day. And then give me a half hour space from it. I'm like, oh my God, I was so annoying. They couldn't wait to get rid of me. And then like other people in my life, they're like, do you think somebody would have spent 3 hours with you at a coffee shop talking to you if they thought you were annoying and couldn't wait to get the hell away from you. And I'm like, but at the end, it was just too much and they just couldn't get away from me. They just like couldn't get away. And I'm like, oh my God, how am I turning such even positive interactions, turning them into this like anxiety cloud of like, it's still like I even turn that into like, I suck somehow. And I'm like, I don't know, like, you know, I'm in therapy and I love self-help and all that crap, the podcasts and the books and all of the things. And it's like, okay, well, this is coming from somewhere, like not necessarily it has to come from childhood, but I mean, for me, it comes from childhood and then it comes from being in like a very toxic industry, radio. And then also, it's not like the health and fitness industry has its own big mountain of toxicity as well. So it's like, no wonder I like get into these like feed loops. And so it's like, well, how do I stop that? Like, how do I constantly even take the most positive things and somehow find one little speck in them to then take that, like you said, like, oh, I'm just going to stay awake at night and just spin over this one thing and somehow talk myself into that it was a bad thing.
I will tell you that for me, and I'm sure there's a different journey for every single one of us because we're all so different and have such different gifts. I notice a huge difference in my personal happiness if I'm not sitting down in the morning, saying to myself, writing it down or something, the things I'm thankful for. And it can be as little as I'm thankful I have running water because some days I'm in such a bad mood, I cannot come up with anything, which is crazy to me because I have so much to be thankful for. But if I just stop and focus on the positive things, or put a spin on the things that are negative, like, oh, okay, this closing got delayed. I'm super frustrated. Well, great. Now I have some free time today, like reframing things in my mind and trying to focus. And I don't want to get into toxic positivity because I do think you got to feel your bad moments and lean into those sometimes to really enjoy the good moments. But when I stop and think, okay, I got to sleep in, I have this great husband I get to spend time with, my dogs are adorable. And then it just expands from there. And I do believe that what you focus on expands. So if I spend the morning focusing on the positive and the good things in my life, my day is so much better than if I spend the day focusing on all the crap and the stuff that I can't control and really shouldn't be leaning into anyway.
Yeah. I've had this conversation. So through Sarah with Team Fit with me, Jeanette is her mindset coach, and I've been working with her and she's fantastic. And so I was telling her, I'm like, as much as I love, and I do focus on gratitude in my own ways, like the gratitude journaling doesn't really hit the mark. Because again, then I'll just write like every day, like I love my cats, and I'm not like, and I'm not putting it like in this other perspective. I feel like that is helpful, but I do get into those spaces when I do meditate. And so like, I'm like, I have to make it a priority to meditate. And something that me and her, like we're brainstorming on of something that I have been doing that does work with my brain in that way too, is at the end of every day, I journal, instead of, for me anyway, like the things that I'm thankful for, my own version of that is what did I accomplish today? So I'll write, cause like whatever, and I know that's probably has its own bad connotations of workaholic and focusing on those, but it's helpful for me to write down just even like, even the past several weeks I've been writing like, I took care of myself today. I made it my job to take care of myself today. That's what I accomplished today. I did the things, I went for a walk, and to remind myself of even like in like business and work things, like the successes I have there, the successes of like, hey, I actually just sat down and watched a movie instead of just like not getting off of my laptop or creating content or something. So I feel like that's helpful in the day to day. And now that I've been doing that for a while and I flip back through and looking at those accomplishments, I'm like, I forgot I even did that. Like, then like you compile of like, look at what I did in just like a month time span or in a couple week time span. I'm like, I am getting so much stuff done in my life of work on myself and work on, you know, just like business success and everything else. I'm like, how can I possibly treat myself this harshly when this is how much, like, it's not like I'm the laziest person and you should be doing this instead, because I'm so that person of like, oh, you're sitting still, you're not getting anything done, you're lazy. That does come from like childhood stuff of like, oh, you're not pulling your weight, you're not, you know, get to work. Like you're valuable based on the amount of things that you're doing. And so that's really hard to unwind. And I think that's why that's helpful for me to kind of see those things, because that helps me get through it. But also at the same time, I've been rewarding myself for stopping and That's a new thing.
That's
for me
important.
Too. Yeah.
I think it's so good you brought up meditation, because I think meditation is, I think, one of those words that gets pigeonholed, kind of like feminism gets pigeonholed.
Yeah.
Meditation looks different to everyone, right? And spending a few minutes in solitude by yourself and decompressing is meditation. For anyone, you can do it. You can do it while you're driving if you're just spending some minutes time quietly pondering yourself and getting back in touch with yourself, because we have so many distractions now. But I'm so happy you said that you put in your accomplishment journal that you sit down and make space for watching TV. Or like yesterday I took a nap, which I always feel so guilty about, which is crazy to me because sometimes I work from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. I'm like, of course I deserve a nap, because I might work 8 days in a row before I get an afternoon off. So it's okay to sit down and value yourself by letting yourself rest.
Yeah. And I think just so culturally we're told not to rest, but it is, but then it's like, well, self-care, but then self-care is like, well, take a bubble bath, but then make sure you Instagram about it. You know what I mean? So it's like, can I self-care without telling the world I'm self-caring? And so it's like, I think the social media goes like, I think I definitely feel much crazier with so much social media being out there, because it is like, especially for what I've been doing with this podcast and with Instagram and just in radio, and how much I've just been trained to be an entertainer and sharing my life. Like I've been sharing my life publicly since I was a teenager. So it's like, it never turns off. It's where your value comes from of doing those sorts of things. And I feel like that's super toxic on every level. And then it's like, well, you can shut it all off. And I think it's super healthy. But then for me, I'm like, well, if I shut it all off, then does nobody listen to my podcast, which I feel like I'm trying to create to like help other people and do these things. And I have to have a business and everything else. And I think like, there's just like no balance. And I even saw because I do consume too much TikTok. And speaking of bringing back you working in the music industry, that all these people are saying like that are authors and that work in the music industry. They're like, if you aren't a viral sensation and you're not creating content to get your music out there or your book out there on social media, like people aren't even like publishers and like record labels won't even bother with you now if you aren't cranking out viral content on the thing that you're not like. It's like if you're an author, if you're an artist, it's not like it's your thing to create TikToks, but now it has to be your thing. Otherwise you don't even get to share your music or your writing. And so it's
it's crazy. And I think too, I've noticed working in real estate, they say that too. And there are some amazing motivational speakers on business that I love very much, except for the fact that they're like, you have to be on Facebook, you have to be on Instagram, you have to be on TikTok, you have to create 6 things a day and they have to be high value. I'm like, how are we supposed to be everything to everyone and still have time for ourselves and time for our family? And as women, like one of my love languages is just gifting things to people. I love to give to people. So sometimes I give so much of myself away, I forget to give anything to myself. How am I supposed to get up, do all the things I have to do for work, get to the gym, have time to get stuff done around the house, have time to make a meal and sit down and enjoy time with my husband? There's just not enough time in the day. And so I think sometimes I decided about a year ago, based on a friend's recommendation, to take Facebook off my phone. And it is the best thing I ever did for me. I took TikTok off my phone too, because it's a time suck and I'll realize that I was in a black hole of unawareness for 6 hours and I resurfaced and I don't know what happened. But taking social media off my phone and putting limits on social media where it says, okay, you've been on here for 15 minutes, gives me the awareness of not getting sucked into other people's illusioned lives, because it's not their life. It's what they choose to project. It's not their reality. We don't see them waking up with a big zit on their forehead talking about real things. We see this filtered, beautiful image of them and their husband who they probably just had a massive fight with, but we're not hearing about that. It's just become this keeping up with the Joneses, but it's this unrealistic image of what the Joneses are. And I'm over it. I don't want to buy into it anymore because it's not real.
Well, and I think it's hard too on the other side of it, where it's like, there's so much of that and people like I think Instagram is probably the guiltiest of it. and Facebook and definitely like LinkedIn of like showing the best of the best and not the bad days. And that's why I do like TikTok, because it is more real and raw. But at the same time, it's like, can you truly be authentic when you are being recorded? Like, even like now, like we're having this conversation would be a little bit more raw and a little bit more trucker mouth if we weren't like recording for a podcast. And so
yeah,
it's like,
for sure. It was when we had it the first time.
yeah. So it's like, once there, there's a microphone in front of you, or there's a phone recording you or something like that, there, you can't help but have some level of filter. And so it's like, even when people are quote unquote being raw and authentic and they're crying and they're upset, you're still doing that through the lens that you're being recorded. Like, if I'm crying and having a meltdown in my car and I'm trying to show that that's what real life is versus here's me in my shiny, happy life, it's still through like, I'm propping up a camera, I'm getting the angle, I'm hitting record, I'm talking about my pain right into, same said for this podcast of like, when I'm in the middle of a spiral meltdown, I don't run into this room and make sure I record it. Like, I go through my thing and I turn on the mic whenever I'm in more of a headspace to kind of talk about those things, but like put my thoughts together more. And so,
but don't we always do that with other people too? I think really I'm only 100% authentic when I'm alone. I think even about when I have a hard conversation with a friend or my husband, I'm putting it through a filter of how do I think that they're going to accept this the best. I'm not just saying it the way I would say it. So I think we're programmed to put things through filters, whether it's on social media or just a conversation. Like, I might look at myself in the mirror and say, girl, you messed up today. See, I just censored myself because I was going to say fucked. But you messed up today.
You can go ahead. I can mark this episode as explicit. It's fine.
Like, and like, I would do that to myself, but I would never look at my husband and be like, you were the worst I've ever seen you today. Because I wouldn't want him to feel anything like that. So I would censor whatever I was thinking. Even though I might have a thought in my head, I'm not going to portray that out to the world if it's someone other than myself. So we're always filtering. We've been filtering since way before social media.
So then do you feel like social media, when you see those sorts of things and people sharing like breakdown moments and trying to show the like more raw part of things, do you find that helpful at all? Or do you feel like that still fits into some weird category as like, hey, here's me and my shiny, happy family?
I think it's twofold, because I do think that there are some people that post raw, real moments, and I think that they don't orchestrate them or facilitate them. And then I think that there are some people who are like, oh, I was emotional yesterday, I'm going to recreate that. And I don't know why I used that voice for it. That was a little unfair to whoever speaks that way. Yeah. But like, I think it's twofold. If you're creating a crappy moment to make someone feel better, or to show like your real authentic self, I don't buy into that, but I feel like I'm really good at pegging people's real moments. But I have seen people post real anger or real frustration or real emotion online in a way that feels real and it doesn't feel edited. You're seeing them slip up, you're seeing them gather their thoughts, you're seeing them feel all the things, but there is a camera there. And I think we've learned, especially some of the younger generations, like we're probably the top end of the age limit where cameras have been around on a regular basis.
Yeah.
But, some of these younger generation of people have had cameras around since they were little. Mom and dad have been filming them with their phones since they were tiny. So it might feel foreign to us on some level, but I don't think it always feels foreign to some of the younger generation. I think this is how they express themselves. Yeah. And I think it's important to realize that some of it's orchestrated and some of it's real.
Yeah. And I feel like I feel like I'm pretty open and vulnerable, especially because I've done so much of that on the radio and doing this. I feel like where things have changed for me, and I think I've pulled back. I don't think so much on the podcast as much as I have like on Instagram, is because now I'm just so afraid of people tearing me apart. Because people are so mean and people just have such strong opinions. And so it's just kind of like, I feel like, and I put this poll up on my Instagram like a month or so ago or something of like, I feel like I really can't talk about my own weight loss too much. And I feel like that I don't feel like everything I talk about is my weight loss. I think if you go through this whole podcast, I talk on a lot of topics, but I feel like the weight loss for me is a big part of my story, and making the healthy choices. The weight loss was a side effect of that. And yes, like losing over 100 pounds changed my life in a lot of ways, because a lot of changes happened to me mentally to make that happen physically. And so, but I feel now, if, I'm posting or discussing any sort of weight loss or anything like that, and I used to online a lot more, that it turns into, I'm body shaming, or I'm part of toxic diet culture. And I'm like, that is the furthest thing from my intention from talking about that, or why I do any of this, or the things that I do. And I just like get afraid of like now, which I guess I shouldn't be. And I guess I'm too sensitive, where I just don't want to deal with like negative pushback, because I'm like, life's hard enough without having to deal with people in the comments telling me that I suck. And when people just are misunderstanding what I'm saying. So then I feel like I can't be as raw or as real or really discuss some of the hard things that I'm going through, because I'm afraid if I write that out and I don't write it the certain way, or I don't think it out well enough, I'm going to leave myself open for attack. And it's like, I'm trying to help. I'm not looking to get attacked and feel bad about my own body image, or feel like I want anybody to feel bad about their body image. So it's like, I feel really stunted in that way, where I'm like, all I want to do is help. And I feel like I can't. I feel like my voice has been taken away in a level, I guess, out of fear. And I think that sucks.
That does suck. But it's interesting, because I follow a lot of positive women online, and I don't even know what field to call it, but the Brene Browns of the world, and the Glennon Doyle, and like some of these women that I guess it's self-help, but it's more about even just creating a community of women that support each other.
Yeah.
And even they get attacked. And even like you could say, I love everyone and I want everyone, even the people that I don't feel physically close to anymore, don't have friendships with anymore. I want them all to have success in their own way. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart. But if they're not able to receive that, they're going to attack. And unfortunately, with social media, we've created a platform for people to say something without understanding how it's received. I would never walk up to somebody and say, you're body shaming someone. I mean, I guess maybe given the right circumstance, I might.
Yeah, if they were like obviously doing that.
Bad.
Yeah,
exactly. But if it's online, I can type it out without thinking and then hit send without reflecting on how it's received. And too many times, I think people hide behind their keyboards and don't think about the fact that they're saying this to a real person. It's a real person that's going to be receiving that. And it's created a weird new thing in our world where we feel comfortable saying stuff behind a keyboard that we would never, ever, 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 ever say in real life.
Yeah, definitely. And then I feel like, again, I would never write those things to anybody. I'm kind of like a ghost anyway, where I'll just creep on everybody and not really say anything ever anyway. I've always kind of been that way. But it's like
me too.
But it's like I just like I guess this is something that I have to work through, and through all of this of like, well, if this is what I want to do, I have to like strengthen that armor a little bit more, which it's so funny because within radio, I did have that armor up. Like, oh, you want to tell me you hate my laugh, or you want to tell me that what we did was stupid, or you're pissed off because you didn't win the contest,
you didn't win.
or because like you wanted a T-shirt and we didn't have any, and you don't want a can koozie or whatever dumb radio crap that is. I'm like, whatever. Then don't listen. Then don't listen and go away. This is a free service. Leave.
But again, they're saying it to you. They're not typing it. I mean,
they typed it a lot.
I think in the way, but when we were in Rochester, they were saying it.
Yeah.
I had someone call up one day and call me a slut, and I'm like, okay, that's cool because you literally don't know me, and you're basing that on my voice and a picture you saw online. So you can think whatever you want. But if someone typed that to me on Instagram, I'd be like, where did that come from? Like,
yeah, it's weird, and that's where I feel like, well, with even radio, and I mean, I just left radio 2.5 years ago. Again, like it's weird how your brain works, where it's like those sorts of things didn't really get under my skin that much because I'm like, well, whatever. Radio isn't me. Like it's a part of me. It's my job. But like with talking about like health and wellness and everything that I'm doing with this podcast and my Instagram and my business and everything else, and I'm like, that is me. Like it is me.
It's vulnerable.
This is my body image, and I'm putting it out there. So it's like when I get those kinds of comments, like it's like it cuts me hard, even if it's stupid stuff. Like I stopped doing my meal prep Sunday on Instagram so much because I was getting all these DMs of like, that looks gross. I would never eat that. Like I could never eat the same thing every day. And it's like, I get so many of those and I'm like, I'm not telling you to eat it. I'm just trying to be helpful and showing what I'm doing. And it's like one of those things where it's like, if it was a radio thing and I was doing it, I'd be like, F off, get out of my life. But like this, it's because it is my life and I'm trying to just be helpful because people ask me about those things that I've done. Then I don't know why it just like hits this other chord. So it's like, I just think that's so hard of like, even like in person in friend groups and stuff like that, of like being truly vulnerable and authentic. It's like you put yourself out there, but at what point do you crawl back into a shell? Because you don't want to just get like dinged on these like I think it's not like little things of like, again, it shouldn't bother me that somebody's like, your food looks gross. So it's like, well, whatever. I'm not a chef. It's not my job. I'm not asking you to eat it.
I'm not feeding it to you.
So it's like intellectually, you know that, but still when like, you know, it still like puts a little chink in the armor. And so then it's like, so how do I like make these, and knowing that that's their shit and they're projecting and they don't like whatever. And so they just got to knock somebody else down and they, whatever, of like, how do I build that armor up? And I feel like that's just with everything of like, it's just like, you know, where do you find your weak spots and how often do you have to armor up, or do you just keep it very vulnerable and have, I don't know. I don't even know where I'm going with this, but it's like, I don't know.
Well, one, I have a question for you. Do you think that other people's negativity filters into your self-dialogue sometimes?
Yeah. And this is where, you know, in my own therapy and stuff like that too, is just, I'm just a very deeply empathetic person. And I definitely and that was also very hard for me being an in-person personal trainer, of just like, especially anybody that's struggling so hard and talk, like, I just feel that so much. And all I want to do is like take that away from them. But then, so I'm like, well, I'll hold it for you and I'll never let it go. Mm-hmm. And then it'll just seep into my head. And if I can't fix that for somebody or give them the advice that's going to put them on the right path, or even if like they don't listen to it, then I'll internalize that is I'm wrong and I'm not doing this right and I suck. And so it's like, yeah, I for sure just absorb that stuff too much, which is like a thing that I've been working on in my own growth, is like healthy boundaries and knowing when somebody's projecting their shit onto me and it's not mine to have, even if they're saying a negative comment to me about like specifically like a weight loss thing or something like that, or something about health and wellness. And it's something very like angry of like, they're angry and frustrated about something about them. It's not like I necessarily like I'm attacking them. And so, but it's so hard because if then I will just internalize that so much and I will completely shift gears. Like I will e-brake anything I'm doing and turn the whole ship around or turn the whole car around, because I'm like, I don't want one person to be like upset or hurt with anything that I've said or done. And I have to stop doing that.
I keep telling myself, this has been like since we had our conversation a couple of weeks ago where we were just kind of venting. Yeah. I've been telling myself a lot, this isn't about you. This is, everyone comes into the experience of communication with all their baggage. And many times when someone responds in a bad way, and I think it's that way online as well, it isn't about you. It's about whatever they're carrying. And so I have to ask myself a lot, is this something I could have changed? And if the answer is no, then it's not about me and I have to find a way to let it go. I can't carry other people's problems, but I'm empathetic too. And if I go out and show houses with somebody who's frustrated because they keep getting outbid or they can't find a house that they really like in their price point, I internalize it. And it's not about me. The market is what it is. I can't change that. But I've had to learn how to filter out this is within my control and this is not in my control moments, and remember. And I think a lot of women do this. Almost all of my female friends have these moments where they're like so concerned with the external things that can't be changed, but we don't stop and say, can I change this? We just take it all in, and our shoulders get tight and the anxiety builds, and then all of a sudden you get to a breaking point and you yell at your kids or you yell at your husband or you yell at the dog, and it can be avoided. It's just a matter of trying to figure out the ways that help you come down and realize it's not about you. It's not in my control. I should let it go, and learning how to let it go, which is really stinking hard.
Yeah, the whole letting go thing is, again, a big thing that I'm working on, because it's like I'm mourn the end of every meal. Like, it's like I have a hard time letting go that the time to eat is over. And so, and plus I'm just like such a like a nostalgia hoarder. Like, I have so much radio crap that I don't need. I have a bag of 200 pens from this first station I did a morning show on. I don't need 200 pens for a radio station that hasn't existed since 2004, but I won't let it go because I'm like, well, you know what I mean? So it's like, and so like, just take that from like the physical space to all of this shit that I hold on to mentally with, you just even, hearing, if I will go and look in the mirror and I'm in a bad headspace day, hearing my mom in my head of like, look how wide your hips are. You know what I mean? Of like these things that you hear that one thing and you just hold on to it forever. And it's like, this is not serving me in any sort of way. This isn't even my voice. How do I let this go and get this out of here? And it's so hard. And especially like, I just feel like all of the trauma that we've been through in the past 2 years with COVID. And then, then you have like now with the prices of everything is insane. And there's like, just the world feels like it's getting crazier and crazier somehow. And it's like, so you have just like this mass amount of stress and you're just like, want things to be like the way that they used to be, but was it really that good then either? And it's just like, everything feels like it's on fire all the time. So it's like, it's so hard to pull yourself into those moments and be like, you know what I mean? Of like, what am I overreacting for? Whose voice is this in my head? Is this something to believe? Is this I feel like we're all just so overloaded with everything. It's so hard to like calm it down and take those things down like the one notch at a time. And I think especially as women in general, where we take on everybody's crap and does stuff for everybody all the time, it's just like, how do you, and again, like it feels like we always put ourselves last and put ourselves on the back burner. So it's like, yeah, it's just easier to blow up than to stop and think about this one particular thing and unwind it.
I also think that, particularly women, I do have male friends that go through this too, but particularly women, we just don't talk to each other about the crap part of our days. Like, we don't want to bog other people down. We don't want to worry people. We don't want to be a nuisance or a Debbie Downer or all these things that we've been told forever. So we don't talk about it as much as we should. And I don't know that our conversation today is like solving problems, but I do think once you and I kind of had this talk a couple weeks ago, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm not alone. And it feels really good to not be alone and to not feel like the weird outsider. Because sometimes when I'm going down the rabbit hole and I'm like 3 hours away from, bedtime was 3 hours ago, I got to get up in another 3 hours and I can't get my mind to settle. I'm like, I'm crazy. I've got to be the only person that beats themselves up like this. Why am I this way? Why am I? And it's not just me. Like, I think a majority of women, a majority of people probably have struggles like this on some level, and we just don't talk about it. We don't say, hey, sister, I got your back. We are all here together. I feel the same way that you feel sometimes. You feel the same way that I feel sometimes. All of a sudden I feel seen, but we don't have those talks. We're like, I'm perfect. My career's perfect. My husband's perfect. Everything's perfect. And then we go home and have a massive breakdown because it's not.
Yeah. Well, I will say two things. I find in most conversations that I have when you're asking somebody like, how are you doing? Everybody's like, I'm good. How are you? Oh yeah, things are good. And I will say this literally just happened yesterday. That a friend of mine that I've been friends with like forever, like we've known each other since high school, and we are kind of falling in and off of talking. So it's like, we don't talk all the time, but it's one of those things of like, oh, she could come to town tomorrow and stay at my house for 2 weeks if she wanted to. And it's fine. It's like one of those kind of like friendships. And so, she messaged me about something, and like, it was something like, that I posted, and I'm like, how have you been doing? And she wrote back and she's just like, I have to be honest with you, not good. And told me some of the things going on in her life. And I wrote her back, I'm like, you don't know how much I appreciate for you just saying that, like being honest, to be like, and she even said at the end of what she wrote, she's like, I just didn't want to lie to you and be like, yeah, I'm fine. And I was just like, oh my God, dude. I'm like, seriously, if you want to talk, like, let's talk. And it's like, how refreshing that is. It's like, you hate to see that, like, one of your friends is in pain and is struggling. But it's like, I'd much rather, when I be like, how are you doing? Have this very honest answer of like, not so good. I'm not feeling good.
Today sucks.
Yeah. Like, it's just like, I'm struggling with mentally or physically or whatever it is. And to be like, dude, like, yeah, I'm here. Like, let's talk. Like, and then, then I was like honest, and she's like, how have you been doing? And I'm like, chaotic. Like, so it's like, hey, I'm like, some things are going very well and other things aren't. And so it's like, then I'm like, it gave me the space instead of to just write back. If she's just like, how are things? Oh, they're great. Whatever. How are you? Oh, I'm good. To have like open this dialogue of like, things aren't so great. How are you? Well, let me be honest. Some things in my life aren't so great either. And it's like, that just feels, that's what friendship feels like. That's what a connection feels like. Not that we need to bog each other down. And it's like we're being a bummer or we're focusing on the negative or that we're like, not optimistic people.
No.
But it's like, it's so much better than bottling it up and pretending that's good. I don't want anybody to think that I'm not a success. And if they think that I'm not a success or I'm successful at any part of my life, then I'm a failure.
They're not your people.
Right. And so it's just kind of like, yeah. And I just think that it's just really, really incredibly hard to do. And I'm guilty of that too, of people being like, how are you doing? And it's fine. Like, it also depends on who's asking.
For sure that, but like, also if you think about where we are now in human evolution, we carry a lot by ourselves and we didn't used to. We used to be in a community and we used to have gatherings and share the workload. And also, we didn't put all of our 100% of our like emotional dependence into a spouse or a friend. It was the whole community was together and carrying each other and working through things together. And now you have maybe one or two people that you might confide in. And I think it's really changed how we carry things, because I think the world is heavy. It's been really heavy the last 2 years. We're so used to carrying it all ourselves. We've been told that other people don't care about your problems for so long that we don't tell people. And it's created this sense of aloneness that we don't have to feel. People care. The people that don't care aren't your people, but people that are your people, they care. They want to share the load with you. They want to help you. They want to be there. I guess what I'm trying to say is it's important to give people the honor of showing up for you.
Yeah, well, I really like that. Taking this conversation into a slightly different direction. This is a conversation I just had with another radio person who's still currently in radio a couple weeks ago, because I was talking about like how important connection is. Like, I just think that, and also I'm a big Brene Brown fan, and there's a lot about connections there, but it's like, then we were talking about in-person connection versus virtual connection, where for me, I feel so much more connected to people in person. I really have a hard time with the virtual component. I think virtual can be really great. And I've met people that I would have never met before because of a virtual component. But it's like where I feel like the biggest, strongest connections are made. I think that in person is really important. This counter argument was, well, I don't know about that, because if you look at like people that are like in Twitch and like gaming communities and a lot of these things of like they're finding or YouTube or just anything, or have people that have their like crew, or even if you are like a viral like TikToker or something, like this is communities that you've created because of the internet and having those connections virtually. This person argued that that's more important currently in current times in 2022, and that in-person connection isn't as important. I don't know if you could put an importance level in either one of those, but I don't know. Do you feel like there's any sort of difference between being in person or having virtual connections?
I think for me, there is, but I can't speak for everybody. I have had connections with people virtually but I will say that the majority, like, I feel connected to you right now, but we also know each other outside of this Zoomy type online world.
Yeah, we met each other in person.
Yeah. So, but I have had conversations with people, and during 2020, I had a really new therapist that I ended up having to connect with online or on the phone all of a sudden. And that was really strange, but I was able to open up and connect. I think it's different for me because I'm a very big energy person and I can feel positivity or negativity in person that I have a hard time picking up on with like a phone call or a Zoom call. So I get a lot out of being near a person because I can feel the interaction happening.
Yeah, I feel the exact same way. I think that's why that just leaves more of an impact on me. And I just even feel like, and I just, this is just even a different level, but it's still connection. I have such a hard time with like virtual fitness. Like I don't like virtual fitness classes or yoga. And I think it's amazing that it exists. And I used the Peloton app in 2020 on like this crappy spin bike that I got off Facebook Marketplace. But it's like, I love that it exists and it's a choice and it's an option. And again, like people like, I can't remember the yoga chick that's like real huge. It's like Yoga with Adrian or something like that have built these really great communities on that. And I think that's amazing. But for me, I'm like, I can't stick to that. Like I just can't. I'm even part of a group now that's working on central nervous system training, and it's all virtually. And I'm having such a hard time sticking with it because if the class was like I had to physically go there like on a Tuesday night and I needed to be there, I'm like, I would do it and I would love it to death. But because I have to make a virtual appointment, if for some reason did make some sort of disconnect where I'm like, I don't get into it.
So I hear what you're saying, but I counter you with you've created a community of online people who have created connections because of you.
That's true.
So maybe it's just different situations feel different, but you have helped a lot of people and you probably don't even know the scope of the help that you've given people, and people have made connections because of finding you. So maybe in certain class or learning type environments, it's difficult to connect, but you've created connections. So if you can create them, you could probably enjoy them too.
That's true. Yeah, that's a really good point. And yeah, and that's where too of like even my favorite podcast, like I've been listening to them since 2010. I met them once and lost my damn mind. Like I fangirled so hard.
I love it.
Like it was like, and it was so funny because I was at a conference with radio people. This was in 2019. And one of my coworkers is like, you've met so many celebrities and you just don't even really care. And he's like, I've never seen you fangirl. So I literally jumped over a chair and ran down a hallway to meet them.
I love it.
While I was talking to like bigwigs from the company about my podcast, and I'm like just bailed out of the conversation. They thought I had like diarrhea or something. They thought I like lost it, and I was just I snurted. I had to just scare the shit out of them. They were probably just like, this psycho. So it's like I have that connection to them. That's true. So like, and I guess in that arena, I feel like connection really close of like listening to. And that's why I wanted to go into radio anyway, was the connection I felt from these strangers from the radio. So I guess so that's a really good point. I feel very connected, and I guess in a communication realm like this, but when it comes to fitness or learning, or I have to do a physical act on top of the virtual, I feel like I just don't feel any connection at all. Like that
makes sense.
I guess it's, I lose it there a ton. But it's also why, I mean, it's definitely a huge experiment that I'm in the middle of learning, of creating this like event, a live podcast event that I'm doing in August, is because I wanted to bring the in-person connection to the podcast connection. And that's where it's like, with that point, maybe that won't work as well as I hope it will, because maybe the connection just is better in a virtual realm here. I've never flown to New York to go to any of my favorite podcast events before.
Okay. Yeah. But then you say that, but I do think that the people who are showing up, they're your people. And so I think whether or not we like feel that connection, I'm actually rethinking my answer as we have this conversation because I can tell my people, I can listen to, Soul Conversation with Oprah or a Brené Brown, and I can tell like, okay, that person's on my wavelength. That person is my people.
Yeah.
And I think I would connect more with a person that I feel that with than somebody who's like super into something that I'm not into.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I think connection is so obviously so important and so ingrained to us as
Yeah.
animals. And I think that social media and just like technology is just like, again, like I think this whole basis of a lot of this conversation is just like been shattered and fragmented. And it's like so hard to piece that together of like, and especially with COVID, of not being able to do in person for so long. And that just made things really weird. And so it's like and the fact of like we're all again like not talking about like being brutally honest about like how we are, what's going on, and that's like missing connections. I feel like, I don't know, I feel on some level like most of us are all starved for some sort of like connection and community, whether that's virtual, in person, with your family, with your friends, or whatever. I'm like, I feel that too, where I feel like I have so many amazing people in my life, but at the same time, I'm like, I still crave so much of like those really real moments and like especially the moments I love, like the gratitude moments where you just feel like you're very present in the moment and appreciate that moment so much, of just like, even if it's just like a pretty sunset or like grabbing drinks with friends or whatever it is, to like fully be immersed in that moment of like, I'm here, this is great. Isn't my life awesome right now? And I feel like life is so busy and gets so crazy that we miss those moments in the moment later.
Oh yeah.
And I think that
sure.
that kind of becomes like, I think, a starvation for a connection in a way that we're not even like connecting with ourselves in the present moment.
I think we all have those friends that teach us how we would want to show up for someone else. And I think what this conversation is showing me is that there are different levels of that. Like this conversation is making it clear to me I want to show up for people in a different way. And there are friends that show me I want to show up in a different way for friends or for myself. I have friends that are such good masters of their own self-care and of being true to them and never letting their moral compass sway. And all of those conversations teach me something. I think one thing that we could all benefit from as women is just leaning into our relationships with other women. And most people can tell if someone says, I'm fine, if they mean it or not. And if a girlfriend says, I'm fine, and it doesn't sound authentic, leaning in and showing support and being there for them and giving them the opportunity to open up. Because I think so many times we maybe don't feel that opportunity to open up. And so we second guess ourselves. But if someone shows me it's safe, dude, I'm an open book.
Yeah. I think that's a really big keyword, is feeling safe. I feel like being in I feel like that if you're in a circle of people, unfortunately, even if that's family, which I can speak to, that you don't feel safe in, then you have to change that circle. And that's self-care, is like realizing that you're in a place that's not a safe space for you mentally. And how do you actually change that and make that? And that's where I feel so incredibly lucky now. And I do have this podcast to thank of, I've met so many people from doing this podcast, especially here in Cincinnati, that I would say now I have so many really amazing, supportive women in my life. And I feel like, especially in radio for a long time, I mean, not that radio doesn't even have that many women in it, but it's such a different atmosphere. Not that there weren't great women. Obviously, we work together, and I think that you're an amazing woman, but it's like, it definitely has a little bit more cattiness. It has more jealousy, competition, a lot of just insecurities. And,
that's a good point.
And so it's like, I feel like that was my people for such a long time. And now I feel so grateful. I'm like, wow, I have really thoughtful, amazing women that like truly have my back, that I can tell them really exciting news. And it's not the attitude of like, well, why is she getting that and I'm not?
That's amazing. That's a good point. And thank you for the compliment. We did work with a few really amazing people in radio. One thing that real estate has taught me that I find so humbling and amazing is that there's a ton of women in real estate, and there's a ton of very amazing women in real estate. And I have learned how to be in competition with people I respect, admire, don't want to hurt, love dearly, and not let it affect a relationship. And that's been a huge lesson, because in radio, it was like, well, gosh, if I beat this person out for this job, I don't know if we're going to stay friends. And in real estate, you're constantly competing against each other. And you just learn that I love it when my friend gets a listing that maybe I was up for too, because I love to see people succeed. And so it's reframed my mindset now because there's so much competition all the time. It's almost like there really isn't. People are going to work with who they feel comfortable with.
Yeah.
If that's her business, it's not mine. And I can still love her and be thankful for her and celebrate her. I guess it goes back to that whole reframe. In radio, I didn't feel that. And in real estate, it's been reframed.
Yeah. And I mean, yeah, I definitely, well, I didn't even feel that especially even from men in radio, especially like, oh my God,
Oh, yeah.
there's so many.
That's a good point too.
Like men in radio, but it's like,
I just threw up.
I mean, not only just even like, oh, she got that endorsement deal and I didn't, but even like she got the laugh and I didn't. So how just backstab angry sort of that attitude is of like, you have something that I wanted. And like, it's such a toxic environment. And I feel like there's plenty of friend groups that have that within friend groups. And it's like, if you're living in that, get the hell out of it.
Exactly.
And so it's just like, and it's so hard because a lot of times you don't see that you're in it until you step away from it. Unless you, again, like take a real hard step back and meditate. And I think once you even find some new friends that don't have that attitude, and again, you feel the difference between the two. You're like, wow, people are not like that all the time. And I just feel like, I mean, God, health and fitness is just sopped full of people like that, of like, you know, I'm fitter than you, or like, you know, you're a personal trainer, like you're not that fit, or, you know, it just here's me and my booty pictures on Instagram and I know better than you, or keto is right and everything else is wrong, or CrossFit's right and everything else is wrong. And it's just like so many camps and so isolated and like, just like, you know, just stabby in so many ways. And it's like, but yet there's still so many other amazing people in that. And it's just, I think it's finding your people, which again, virtual sources can be great for finding that group and cultivating those sorts of things. But I think it's hard to, like, even in radio, like I knew radio was super, super toxic while I was in it, but then getting out of it was even more eye-opening of like, I knew it was bad, but then once you have, for me to have space and still have so many friends that work in it, and then still being like playing therapist to them and being like, oh my God, get out. Like, are you serious? Like, is this how you want to live your life? And that's where it's like when people are in toxic relationships or toxic friendships, which toxic friendships are super hard too, because you're like, oh, they're my friend. But if you're feeling somebody's competing with you or not happy for your successes, like, God, like, why don't live your life that way? Like holding the, you know, dimming your light to brighten somebody else's. Like, that's a shitty way to live.
Absolutely. Well, it's interesting because I think most of us have probably have friendships that have come to an end as an adult. And I really do feel like we have an evolution of our life, and there's going to be people that come in and out and people that stay. And I have had a few friendships fail that really hurt at the time. And as I've had a longer time to look back and gain perspective on it, I've realized that it wasn't serving either of us. We just weren't in that place to be friends. And it doesn't mean that we couldn't be close again down the way. It's just that we have different lessons that we're learning at the time, and it didn't mesh. And there's nothing wrong with setting a boundary that takes a person out of your life, because I do believe that when we close that off, we open ourselves up to so many other things and other possibilities, because the toxicity and the negativity can hold us back to the point where we can't see this really awesome thing that's right there in front of us.
Yeah. Well, I think it's also, I've learned too, of not just to take if somebody has something negative to say about you or criticize, to just be like, oh, they're a toxic person, they're in a different space, but like to actually sit there and think through that and be like, are they correct? Like, is that something
Absolutely.
right? And so I feel like I had that a few years ago. Somebody told me that I was the most negative person they'd ever met. And I'm like, I don't feel that. And so like, and that, it was very painful and that was very hard to hear. And so, but I wasn't just like immediately like, nuh-uh, you know what I mean? Or like, you suck. You're the negative one. You know what I mean? Like, and I feel like I've been that way in arguments before. And so it's like taking something like that, or just taking, you know, not those like just stupid negative comments like your food looks gross. Cause that one's like, well, who cares if it is? I'm eating it. But like this, like for something like that, where like that was a chance for me. And I feel like that comment was actually a very big gift for me. because that really made me sit and think on that of like, I don't want anybody to ever think that about me. Is that true? In what aspects of my life is that true? What are they, was that just them trying to cut me and hurt me because I hurt their feelings and that was their way to get back to me? Or is there some truth and validity in that? And it really made me really examine all parts of my life and my behavior. And that actually was a turning point for me to really start getting more into like self-help sort of stuff. And like, that's immediately what I did was like, let me dig into this more and read about it. And I want to be the best version of me I can be. And I don't want anybody to say that something like that to me again. And if they do, I want to feel armored enough to know, like, I know that's not true. Like that is you and that's projection. And like in this moment, I didn't feel that. I'm like, I feel like there's some truth in there somewhere. And so I think it's also having that balance of when you get things your way, it's also your responsibility to really examine that and be self-aware enough of, is this just something that's their thing, or is this something that you could use some work on, and to be honest and kind of look in the mirror. And it's so hard to look at the very ugliest parts of yourself, but it's like, you're not going to grow or get anywhere better by not it being ugly and hard and gross. Like that's what growth is.
But I also think that's a value of a really good friend. I mean, some people say those things and they're not really good friends, but I am fortunate to have friends who have called me out on my stuff before. And I've been like, okay, I know they love me and I know they're coming from a place of love. So it's time for look inside and see what growth opportunities are there.
Yeah. And that sucks. And I think it also really sucks too, when you are in that headspace of growth and, okay, I do want to be the best version of myself, of what I want that to be, whatever that means for you physically, mentally, spiritually. And then that the people that are in your circle, that not everybody is going to come along for the ride. And I think that's also very deeply painful, because there's nothing wrong with them. Like they're not even necessarily like a negative or a toxic person. It's just like, I'm moving into this other space and I'm moving and growing and doing the things that are best for me. And that just puts a divide into our compatibility now. And so it's like, then those kinds of friendships and stuff that kind of split and break away because you're just on different paths. I think it's just like this slow, sad sort of heartbreak where it's like, well, do I choose this friend group or do I choose myself? And it's like, well, it's going to be lonelier choosing myself, but it's like, ultimately I've got to be with me forever. And if I feel better doing these specific things to make myself better, it's like you have to choose that. And I feel like specifically in the topic where I've dealt with so many women over the years, talking so much about health and fitness and weight loss, and hearing very heartbreaking stories of people that are not happy with somebody that's changing their lifestyle and the way they eat and the way they move, or changing the way that their body looks compared to how somebody else that they're in a relationship with or a friendship with wants them to look. And how many people just stop and give up on themselves because it makes somebody else feel uncomfortable about what they're doing. I just feel all around that's just heartbreaking that people are that way, where you feel like if you are being your best self and you're doing that, you want to believe everyone is your cheerleader, especially for women. You're like, oh, girl power, like, let's go for it. And women can be some of the biggest bitches ever. And so it's like where I had to deal with that when I started losing weight, that one of my friends, we're not friends anymore, and she would make negative comments about it and be angry about it. And it's like, and now I see that was a lot of like projection and things like that. I didn't even discuss it. It's just because I was just doing these things in the background, just did not serve our friendship anymore. And it's super, super painful, but it's like, but it's true. So in those scenarios, do you lose that person or do you lose you? And I think that probably for a while, you probably lose you until at what point are you like, I can't do this anymore.
Yeah. And I think it goes back to that question of, is this really about me? And sometimes when those friendships pull apart or when people go on a different path, it's not about you. It's not about them. It's not about me. It's not about, it's an individual thing. But at the end of the day, I think their ego has a nasty voice in the back of our head that's like, oh, it's something you did, but it's not necessarily about me.
Yeah. And that's where it's like, it's crazy. I don't know that I can't pull them out of my butt right now. This just the statistics, but even just like through like weight loss or physical changes. Like it erodes so many marriages of like, it's really sad, but it's like, well, it's either there's like jealousy on the other person's part of like, what do you feel like you need to change for? Are you trying to catch someone else? Or the deep insecurities of like, well, you look this way now, I didn't make these changes. So you obviously are in a different pool of people and now you're getting different attention from different people. And I'm not. Like, it just causes like this crazy rift between people, or you do it together and one person falls off the wagon and one doesn't. And it's like, it causes just like a shitstorm in a lot of like relationships and marriages. And so it's like that, but it's not, I think those things like this, I think where all of weight loss is, it's not about the weight loss. There's obviously some other issues going on there. The weight loss is just a piece of the component that is playing into insecurities and, or just compatibility or all these other things. But then it's just kind of used as the like excuse or the surface level thing of like why things didn't work out. But it is crazy. I mean, that's just, and how many other people where it's like, oh, or if I become more spiritual, or if I get into like this other certain hobby and the other person doesn't, like how much it just like, just shifts because you're choosing things for yourself. And so it's like, I think that, as I'm getting older and I've gone through so many different moves and lived so many different places and met so many other people, I feel like I've changed a ton. I feel like I'm a completely different person than I was when we worked together in so many ways. And it's like, well, would my same friends in Rochester be my friends now? Like, it's not like we wouldn't like each other, but would we hang out in the same ways? No. And it's just part of, I think, life of like fluctuating and ebbs and flows, and people come and go too. And
and we were also in our 20s in Rochester, and now I'm already 40 and you're about to be 40. And I think I'm grateful for the growth that happened between my early 20s and my 40th birthday.
Yeah, for sure. That's where I feel like, oh my God, my 20s. Like, I wouldn't want to be in my 20s again.
I wouldn't want to be friends with the person I was in my 20s necessarily. I mean, I think I had good intentions, but I was definitely sometimes a mean girl, and I was probably influenced by radio on that. But I really love the evolution of myself. And I know a lot of people struggle with age and with their 40th birthday. And I had these moments of it, but then when I dug beneath it, I was like, no, heck no. Like, I'm super grateful for every year that I have on this earth. There are other people that didn't get that opportunity, and I've fought to get where I am, and I have grown to get where I am, and I've taken really long, hard looks in the mirror to get where I am. And that's a badge of honor.
Yeah, for sure. And I think having the gratitude for that is just like so amazing, to be like, have the self-awareness to be like, to look at yourself through that lens rather than like, I'm 40 and I'm old and, I'm losing my value as a woman because like of just like ageism and like what you look like and all this other, like there could be such a huge negative spin on that. For me, like I think of 40, like I already am not 40 yet, but I already feel like I should be. Like, it just feels, it's like all the same thing. 39 is pretty much 40, but it's like, it's one of those things where the only thing that I kind of get freaked out about that, I was just kind of like, oh my God, I'm like my mom's age. You know what I mean? Like,
I know, it's so weird. I woke up on my 40th birthday and I was like, today I am as close to 20 as I am to 60. What the actual F?
And so like, I just kind of feel like that more than anything of like, and just I guess saying phrases like, oh, that was 20 years ago. And I'm like, oh my God, like that was 20 years ago. Like, it's just like stuff like that where I'm like, oh my God, but it's like mentally I feel super young. I mean, especially, I don't know, I kind of already have like this very like, juvenile sense of humor and like being silly and all this stupid stuff. I mean, I just bought an inflatable unicorn I'm very excited about. So it's like, so it's like things like that, but it's like, I noticed like the body aging, but it's like, I'm so much more grateful now. And I am very grateful where in my 20s, I don't think I sat and reflected on anything. It was like binge drinking, binge eating, yo-yo dieting my ass off. And so then it was like, it was when I started what I'm doing now, like when I started like losing weight and changing my whole lifestyle, when I was 29. So like my entire 30s were so much more of just like, who am I? What do I want out of this life? How can I take care of myself? How can I unwind some of the toxic crap that I've been through? Why do I behave this way? And again, it's like not the sexiest things. It's not like, you know, everybody wants to go through all of that, but I'm like, but I'm so much more grateful for the person I am. And I like, you know, I like and I love myself now, where I felt I didn't even like myself in my 20s.
Yeah, I didn't either. It's sad. I mean, sometimes I feel like, I mean, people say it all the time that youth is wasted on the young, but it's like, I wish I had the perspective I had now when I was young and I could have run a marathon. I probably still could, but I would be in pain for like a week and a half after. So I don't know if it would be worth it to try, because with the RA and stuff, I didn't have that then. So now it's like, I feel like I do have limitations, but I'm trying really hard to push my limitations to make sure that I'm not just putting myself in that box. But that's a whole other story for a whole other
right. Well, I feel like I would have definitely, I don't know. I think that if you would put me in the body I'm in now, when I was like 21, I would have made so many awful slutty decisions.
I love your honesty.
I just feel like I felt just like just hating my body so much and so starved for any little piece of male attention, and made really awful decisions based off of that, where it's like, if I would have had body confidence, or, you know, like just being like in a body I felt confident in, but still not work through the mind piece of like, not being like scraping away for attention, for self-worth. Like, oh my God, I would be riddled with diseases.
There was a radio show in the same building as us. And I remember one day, and I would, you know, in my 20s, my body's definitely changed over the years, but I didn't feel like I was fat in any way. Even though I thought I was.
Oh my God.
People like women, I had crazy body image issues. But one of the radio stations down the hall from us had a like 15-minute conversation about how big my ass was one day. And
was it the rock station? Or it wasn't my station. Okay. Oh,
it wasn't your station. It was
like big as in bad? Like
I'm sorry?
Big as in a negative way, or just like, we want that juicy ass?
She has fat potential. She's going to be so big one day. Her ass is bigger than a truck. I cried for a week. I could not. I didn't want to walk by the radio. I had to walk by that station to go to the bathroom, and I would avoid going to the bathroom until they left.
So one, again, the radio industry is so awful. I totally... Yeah, I can totally see that happening. And you know what's really terrible, and I don't want to speak for you. I feel like you couldn't have spoken up about that, and nothing would have been done about it.
Nothing would have been done. Which in any other line of work, HR would have had.
They'd be fired. They'd be so gone.
Absolutely. But there's no such thing as HR in radio or in records. But yeah, no, nothing would have been done. I stayed silent on so many things that were so inappropriate because I was scared that I'd lose my job and never get it back.
I did the same thing. In a lot of ways. And also just because, I mean, I got like harassed and threatened and everything, and I didn't speak up because I'm like, I'm going to be labeled as a bitch and I'm never going to get a job again.
Exactly.
So there was so much of that. I had, at the station I was at before where I met you, I was hosting a charity event with a dude from our sister station. And me and him were co-hosting this event together, and he was the whole time trying to get me to go out into his car and do stuff to him.
Gross.
And I'm like, I can't say anything about this. Like nothing's going to happen. And it's just kind of like, how many other chicks is he preying on and doing this for? And like
a lot.
Yeah. And so it's like, it's so gross in so many ways that's just scratching the surface. Like, God, radio is so toxic. But it's like one of those things of like, how, like you'd think like, how can somebody say that in the air? They made that public in the city of Rochester and nobody like clapped back or said anything. And like, I mean, again, if that would have happened today, they would be done for, not only internally, but in the public eye. Like, you can't say that stuff now, but it's just like, God, yeah, like how many, and I even remember a friend of ours that was also in the same building. as us that was on the air. Like she got put on a list of like the hottest women in radio. Like, why did that even exist? Like why is there a list saying who's hot or not? Like, it's the radio. You can't see them.
Absolutely not relevant in any world.
And so like how then that goes into like who's bangable or not. And that's another male show that I was on. They would go through every employee in the building and talk about who they would let blow them.
Oh, it's such a privilege.
Yeah. So it's like, yeah, no wonder, like, you know, and this is just the industry we're talking about. How many other women are listening to this can relate in their own industries?
Oh, I promise they can, because records was even worse than radio. And that's hard to say, because I had some significant sexual harassment, which is why I left sexual assault, sexual harassment, that I told my bosses about, and they literally said, but do you feel like you're in danger?
Did you say yes?
I did say yes. And then nothing was done. So I quit and I left, and I never pressed charges, because I thought if I want to go back and work in records again, I can't stand up for myself. And this is where all these issues come in, because we've got this negativity coming from every place. My prayer for the generations that follow us is that it's starting to happen, and I hope it continues, that they never have to fear for their job or their safety, because they can't have a voice where they're at.
100%. Yeah. I mean, 1,000% I agree with you. And like, again, we could have spent this whole time just kind of been sharing horrible toxic radio stories. And then that's one of those things where it's like, you know, I don't want to throw like anybody like under a bus, I guess, although they deserve it. But I feel like because you can't say those sorts of things now, and there are repercussions to some degree, at least more of a degree, I guess I feel like it was a decade ago. Mm-hmm. And we're more like aware and awake, where I feel like, because I am on TikTok and I see more of like what Gen Z is doing, where it is more, you know, people talking about mental health and what's okay and what's not. Yeah. That nobody has to feel that way or endure that to like have a job. So like that's
go Gen Z, make it better for everyone.
Right? And it's just like, or, you know, to have like a job that you're trying to do or that you're passionate about. I was so passionate about radio that it's like, that's going to just destroy my own body image and make me like question myself forever. Like that's so terrible. Like, ugh. And you know, it's like sucks is like all those people still have their jobs. Like that's nice for them. So it's like,
nice for them.
and they're still there. At least I know, you know, some of the people that were in my career that were terrible, like they still have their jobs. And people still listen to them and have no idea.
Messed with me still records, and he's still a big old name. And what I take great comfort in is that I don't think you get to treat people the way that some people have treated us and then just get by with nothing. Yeah. Like, I do think it comes around.
Yeah. Well, at least I hope so. And then not to like skew this totally off into this topic, but that's where I feel like, I don't know what your thoughts are on this, of like with the whole Johnny Depp Amber Heard thing. Did you follow that at all? Where I feel like it sucks, because I feel like that made it harder, because I feel like she's kind of just a nutcase. Like, I just feel like it's like you're making this harder for people who...
I had that conversation with someone the other day.
Yeah. Of like,
like now victims already have such a hard time. Let's not make it harder.
Yeah. I am a victim of sexual abuse and a victim of emotional abuse. And physical abuse in some instances. And to like, I wasn't getting black eyes or anything, but it's like, yeah, like, and like, how many times have we were abused in the workplace and we couldn't speak up and have a voice, because it'd be like, well, this crazy bitch, you know what I mean? Yeah. And like, and that's exactly what she did, is like, she abused that. So it's like, oh, make up this story and feel bad for me. And, or at least, you know, my interpretation, allegedly or whatever. It's just like, you made this so much harder for women to speak up. Like, and that's what you said your agenda was, like, no, it's like, it's going to perpetuate the idea of like, oh, well, she's making it all up and she's blowing it out of proportion, and of like, oh my God.
Again, another topic for another day, but a vast majority of women who are severely abused will never come forward. And that is a freaking problem.
Yeah. I mean, myself included. And in the ways that I have spoken up in the past, it was brushed under, like, just let it go away.
Oh yeah.
Just don't deal with it.
Absolutely. Again, another topic for
Yeah,
another
right.
day. But I absolutely the times that I've had abuse in my life, I've never come forward about it.
Yeah, it's just not to take this such a down a dark road, but it's just like one of those things again of like advocating
But
for
it
yourself.
does tie
having your
in.
It does.
Advocate for yourself. You're not alone.
Yeah.
There are people who care and there are people who will listen. And you know, after I did your show in 2019, I had several women reach out to me about their own struggles with rheumatoid arthritis. And I would hope that any woman or man listening would feel comfortable enough to reach out if they're struggling with something now, because we are a community and there are people who care and there are resources for people who are having a hard time, whether it's career-wise, relationship-wise. There's always someone out there that you can talk to, and you're not alone. Absolutely anything I've ever felt about myself, I know someone else has felt about themselves too. And it's time for us to like really work on ending this negative self-dialogue, because every single one of us is a badass. I may not have the same talents as you. You're a badass, and I'm a badass in my own way.
Yeah, definitely. And that's a great note to end on before we start going down some other dark rabbit holes.
Well, thank you. Thank you for letting me be a part of this today.
Yeah. I mean, I'm so glad that we had this conversation, and this came from, again, from our own conversation where we're just kind of like, let's just like talk about this. Like, why don't we just vent? And again, it's like, not that there's some sort of particular topic to this or even a problem to be solved, but I think just having an open, realistic dialogue of like talking about struggles and what's going on in our life and having that, I feel like is so incredibly helpful. And I'm very thankful that you wanted to have this like vulnerable, open conversation on a public forum when you absolutely don't have to do that. So welcome back anytime. And I'm happy to talk about all of the things. I feel like there's a lot of things that we could dive into and probably talk forever.
We could. I feel like I could be on with you for 7 hours and we wouldn't run out of things to talk about.
And then afterwards I'd be like, does she hate me? Was I annoying? Awesome, Wesley. Thank you so much.
AmandaValentineBites.com